Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 4th of October, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So we have an update about the CFTC, regulatory process against Ooki DAO here. So Nicholas here from CoinDesk reports that the court has granted the CFTC motion to serve Ooki DAO by way of HelpBot, allows the service to be retroactive to September 22nd. Ruling comes same day that the LexPunk army files to join the case as friend of the court to argue CFTC should serve individuals properly. So there's an article here for full details on this in CoinDesk. I think the funny thing about this issue is that it seems to be flying under the radar a bit. Like, obviously, there's a lot of attention on the SEC, which I'm going to talk about in a sec. Normally, we think crypto because that is the organization that's given our industry the most grief up until this point, and the CFTC was rather friendly up until this point. But it seems now they're not, right, with this Ooki DAO stuff that they seem to be doing. And they served Ooki DAO, which they've alleged offers a legal leveraged margin trade without a futures commission merchant designation or know your customer program, and the DAO has 3 weeks to respond from that date, meaning if no one responds by October 13th, the CFTC could win a default judgment. So you can read the article for full details here. Look, as I've talked about this before, and I reiterate what I said on previous episodes, this is classic regulatory agencies going after the smaller players in order to set precedent, in order to make it easier for them to go after the larger players. Obviously, Ooki DAO is very, very small. It was formerly BZX. They don't have much money to defend themselves, and it's an easy target. Whereas you go after the big target, it becomes really, really hard. And we've seen that with things like the SEC going after Ripple Labs, I should say, over XRP. Ripple Labs has a lot of money from selling XRP over the years. They have a all-star legal team because of that money. So the SEC is having a lot of issues with their lawsuit against Ripple Labs. And I think they've actually learnt their lesson there. And I think other regulatory bodies have learnt their lesson from that and have kind of said, well, let's just go after the easy targets, right? Like, let's not go for the big guns because they actually have a lot of money to defend themselves. I think maybe some of the regulatory agencies may have underestimated how much money some of these players had, given that the crypto industry kind of still exists in a niche kind of area. Maybe not last year. Maybe I think we kind of entered the spotlight more last year, but I do think, as hard as it may be to believe, that a lot of these organizations just didn't realize how much money there was in crypto, how much money was being thrown around, and how much money these kind of certain companies have, especially to defend themselves. So I think that's why the CFTC is going after Ooki DAO here instead of going after another kind of like DeFi application, maybe a bigger one out there. So just go after the easy targets, easy pickings. I mean, it's a classic strategy. This has been used for a very long time, but obviously it's now being used within crypto. And as I was talking about the SEC, there was another bit of regulatory news over the last 24 hours. So Kim Kardashian famously was shilling, or I guess promoting, a scam called Ethereum Max during the bull market. Now, she did disclose that it was an ad and that it wasn't investment advice, but that wasn't enough because, I mean, it shouldn't be enough just to be able to disclose that and shill whatever you want. So the SEC went after her, settled with her, fined her, I think, $1.26 million, and she was paid $250,000 for the promotion. But, I mean, she has a net worth of $1.8 billion US dollars, so that $1.26 million fine is nothing. But again, this is the SEC going after the easy pickings. They know that Kim Kardashian can pay the fine. They know that she's not going to want a legal battle. She's just going to settle because the fine is pittance to her. And they know what makes a good headline. As I said in my tweet here, it shows the public that the SEC is quote-unquote doing something about the crypto scams, when in reality, they're not. They didn't go after Ethereum Max or the operators of Ethereum Max. They haven't fined them, maybe yet, maybe they will. The victims are all still wrecked. The victims get nothing out of this. And Kim Kardashian gets a slap on the wrist. The SEC gets a good headline, and that's about it. So these regulatory agencies, this is why I've advocated against a lot of them in the past, and I've said that they're full of bureaucracy, they're full of politics, they don't actually do that much good for I guess, like, the financial system. I still believe that, especially the SEC, especially when it comes to crypto. I don't think they've actually done anything good for our industry. They've really dropped the ball on a lot of things. I mean, instead of going after the small things or going after the I guess, celebrity shilling, which obviously we don't like seeing. It's obviously crap, but they could be going after the big things, the big risks, the big scams, the big grifts, and all that sorts of stuff. Obviously, I've talked about Terror a lot in the past, and the SEC did actually go after Do Kwon. But the funny thing is, the SEC has such a bad reputation within crypto, has such a bad reputation generally, that when the SEC served Do Kwon, everyone was just on Do Kwon's side about it. Everyone was saying, well, the SEC is just trying to bully us again, blah, blah, blah. We kind of like, we don't care about the SEC. We're going to take Do Kwon's side, which is hilarious in hindsight, but that's the way it is. If your organization or your institution does not have legitimacy, then everyone's just going to laugh at it. And that's, I guess, goes for every organization or institution in the world, really. I mean, it goes all the way to the nation state level. If your nation state doesn't have social legitimacy, then it's a weak nation state. If it has strong social legitimacy, then it's normally a strong nation state, right? And there's, obviously, I'm simplifying an extremely complex topic, but that is the general gist of it. And that goes for these institutions such as the SEC, the CFTC. And you've seen the opinion of the CFTC go down a lot within crypto simply because they've gone after Ooki DAO here, which everyone kind of sees as an obvious play at going after the smaller players in order to set a precedent for the larger players. So even CFTC, who were regarded as darlings as a regulatory institution by crypto people, is now getting the same treatment as the SEC. And as it should. We should hold these institutions accountable. They are unelected bureaucrats, right? They are not private companies. They are actually working for the public. So they should work in the public's best interest, not in their own best interest, right? In their own individual best interest. But as we know, the larger an institution gets, the more it acts in its own best interest, and it acts for self-preservation. And the people within that institution, they don't really act in the interest of the public. They act in the interest of themselves. And there was actually a video recently of a bunch of banks sitting in they were sitting somewhere with a bunch of government officials. And I can't remember exactly who it was, but there was the biggest banks in the US, representatives from there. I believe that the CEOs from there, and they were just having a laugh about how someone was going from public office and got hired by, I believe, Bank of America, one of those banks, to work there. And it just really shows the revolving door that exists between the public and private markets, where you work in the private industry and then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go work in the public sector. I'm going to go work, do stuff in office. I'm going to, whether it's via election or not, I'm going to go do that. And then after that, obviously you've made a lot of connections, you've kind of know the lay of the land, then you look very appealing to private corporations who are going to pay a lot of money for that access. So it's this revolving door of just insider crap that keeps going on between these things, and it's especially bad in the US because they have such large organizations and such large institutions that they just basically work together. It's not an implicit thing. They don't implicitly work together because implicitly would obviously leave too much of a trail and things like that, but they do it explicitly. They do it, they've done it for a very long time. And honestly, like as time goes on, they kind of push the boundary of what they can get away with. And sometimes they just do it out in the open, like that video, right? That's literally out in the open. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure out what was going on there, but they know that nothing's going to come of it. They know they can do whatever they want. They feel untouchable because, to be honest, I mean, these financial institutions within the US are pretty much untouchable. They got bailed out in 2008. If they fail again, they're going to get bailed out again. Now I'm sounding like a raging libertarian, but I think there's a lot of merit to these arguments where there's just this revolving door going on, and that's why you see a lot of these actions that don't necessarily make sense from the mandate that these institutions have. The SEC has a mandate to regulate the securities. The trading of securities. CFTC has a mandate to regulate the trading of futures and other commodity products, right? And commodities, sorry. But at the end of the day, like the SEC, we can easily say is not fulfilling that mandate when it comes to crypto. Not at all. Because, I mean, not even in the traditional space anymore, but especially within crypto, it hasn't given any clear guidance on anything. It's doing enforcement via regulatory action, via the chilling effect, right? It's not actually doing its job. And that's because the people within the SEC, especially Gary Gensler, like they very much seem like they're only in it for themselves and their only advancement. Where do you think Gary Gensler is going to end up after his term as SEC chairman? I don't know how old he is. Maybe he'll retire, but I don't think so. He'll probably just go get a cushy job at some private financial institution, some large one, whether it be a bank or something else. And it's not hard to see that that's the logical progression of someone who's worked in obviously one of the biggest institutions in the US at the highest point in that institution. But enough me ranting about these sorts of stuff. I think that it's very important just to understand how these things work, to understand that it's not all conspiracy theories. It's not all just like raging libertarians screaming about all this stuff that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you dig even a little bit, it's all there for you to see. And it's so transparent if you dig, because they don't actually care. And at the end of the day, the politicians, all they care about is their image. All they care about is re-election. They'll do whatever they can to protect that. They will do whatever they can to get re-elected. And then these unelected bureaucrats, I mean, they don't really care about their public image because they don't get elected and they don't need to appease voters. Obviously, they need to appease the people that appoint them to those positions and things like that, but that's a whole different game altogether. Like, that has got nothing to do with the public. That has got everything to do with just insider, I guess in the US, Washington-style politics, right? But yeah, I'm going to leave that at that one. Just another thing that the SEC has done that, I mean, it doesn't really serve anyone at the end of the day. They get some money out of it. They get a nice headline. That's it. Didn't actually help anyone, right? But yeah, I'll leave that one at that. All right, on to some Ethereum-related news now. So Tim Biko posted that they just wrapped up another EIP 4844 or proto-danksharding community call, which happened on October 1st. So I forgot to cover this on yesterday's refuel, but this happened on October 1st. There are a bunch of notes here for that meeting that took place. And I mean, there's a lot of notes here. You can go give it a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But what I love about this is the fact that, I mean, it's full steam ahead, right? I did say to you I expected the core devs to take a break after the merge. It doesn't seem they want to take a break. They're very, I guess, excited to keep working on all the other upgrades coming with the Shanghai update. But one thing that stood out to me on this document was the variety of attendees on this call, right? Obviously, a lot of people from the Ethereum Foundation, but there was someone from Coinbase. There were people from the Optimism project, I should say. There were people that aren't affiliated with any organization. I just think that, and there were core devs and things like that, of course, like from Teku and Besu. I just love the diversity here, because it doesn't just mean there's just like only a small group of people from the Ethereum Foundation pushing this thing. There are people across different organizations, whether that be core development, layer 2, or even Coinbase, right, a centralized exchange, being involved in such an important upgrade that's coming to Ethereum, right? And then you can read all these notes for, I guess, the latest on that. But it's just very, very encouraging to see this. I think that, look, I'm not convinced that proto-danksharding will be ready in time for the Shanghai update if we want withdrawals to come with that update. If we do like a separate withdrawal update because we decide that, hey, let's just do withdrawals on their own, I should say beacon chain withdrawals on their own, and then we'll do 4844 and the other EIPs later, well, I can see that happening as well, because I actually saw the other day that I think there are 28 EIPs considered for inclusion within Shanghai. There's not going to be 28 EIPs that go into Shanghai, like not even close to that. I mean, I think the most we've ever had, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's nowhere close to 28. If I had to guess, we'd probably, if we do withdrawals in Shanghai as well, and we do proto-danksharding, I mean, geez, like you wouldn't even have that many, maybe 5 or something, right? Not 28. There's no way in hell you're going to get 28 in one update, but there's always a lot of EIPs there because people want to get their upgrades in, but you know, it doesn't mean that all of those upgrades are actually necessary or actually needed or actually wanted. It's just they're there. Anyone can submit an EIP. But things like beacon chain withdrawals and proto-danksharding are definitely things that everyone wants. We want, people to be able to withdraw their stake for a number of different reasons that I've talked about before. And we also want people to be able to get cheaper transactions on layer 2s. Scalability is obviously a core part of the Ethereum roadmap, so there's not really any objection there from what I see. I think when it comes to 4844, it seems one of the biggest things is the state expiry, I guess like the expiry aspect of it, where after a month it basically expires and the SHU had a backup of it. You can't access that data anymore. I think while it makes sense that it would be controversial or concerning, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, I don't think it's going to be a showstopper. I think when you think about this sort of stuff, if you actually care about that data, about storing that longer term, you have a whole month to download it and store it yourself, and you don't need it to prove that it existed because of the way the state works. Sorry, I should say not the Verkle trees, the Merkle trees works, and the guarantees that you get by obviously auditing the chain yourself. But if you actually want the data and want to be able to unpack it, well, then you need to store it yourself. Otherwise, it expires. And the reason why it expires, from my understanding, is so that it doesn't bloat the chain, it doesn't make it really hard to run a full node, all that good stuff there. It's basically offloading it to anywhere. I mean, just traditional ways of storing data. Like any of us could download that data, store it on a NAS if we wanted to, and we could make it accessible to people over a peer-to-peer network such as BitTorrent, right? And that's not illegal. I mean, sometimes I mention torrents and people are like, oh, torrents, it's like piracy and stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay, a lot of it's used for piracy, but the actual act of using peer-to-peer file sharing is not illegal, right? BitTorrent is not illegal, and it's used for very legitimate purposes because it's just a really great way of sharing data around, especially globally. So I expect there to be a bunch of services spun up that offer this. There'll be paid services, of course. There'll probably be some free ones, but you're free to download it yourself and store it yourself if you want. And I actually will, to be honest. Like, I have a lot of storage space in my NASs. I think I have over 100 terabytes now in my NAS. Most of that is still unused that I can use for this sort of stuff. And I'd love to do that as a service to the network. And yes, obviously I'm not going to make any money from it unless I charge for that data, which I don't plan to do. But I think that that's fine. Like, if you actually care about it, then it's there, so to speak. And you also have cryptographic guarantees that data is what was stored on the chain originally, because you can compare the hashes to each other. Which, unless the hash function is broken, which would be bad for the entire world, you have that cryptographic guarantee there. But anyway, you can read the breakout notes. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. Just great to see more progress happening on 4844. And speaking of upgrades coming to Ethereum, Ali here had a great tweet where they said Ethereum should issue a lucrative prize for the best design and proof of concept implementation of PBS+crList. So I've spoken a lot about PBS and CRList, or censorship resistant list, in the context of making Ethereum more censorship resistant and making it so that MEV doesn't play a huge part in Ethereum, and makes it so that we can, so that builders, can't censor or have a really hard time censoring. And I think I agree with Ali here that there should be a lucrative prize. Tim Biker asks, how big do you think it should be to draw in people who aren't currently working on it? Ali says the ETH2 BLS bounty was 1 million, I believe, so at least that. So I agree, at least that. I mean, if you put this massive bounty on it, you bet your ass someone's going to do this as a new design, or a kind of like the best design and a proof of concept implementation. I mean, honestly, like this, offering $1 million is going to get you that. And that's not much to the Ethereum Foundation when you look at the amount of money they have. And they should really do this. For something as important as PBS and CR lists, yes, it's being worked on. And as Tim says, yeah, there are people currently working on it. If you put a big bounty on it, maybe one of those people are like, oh, wow, okay, I'm going to prioritize this now. Maybe they're working on other things and this isn't a priority for them. But for that amount of money, people will prioritize it. And you might even get new entrants that just weren't interested in it before. And they look at it and like, okay, this is a fun problem to solve. If I solve it, or if I meet their standards, I potentially get $1 million. Well, let's do it, right? $1 million, that's nothing to scoff at, guys. Like, it's a shit ton of money. I mean, imagine if that person got their $1 million, put it into ETH, and then rode the ETH, the next bull market up, and I don't know, made a lot of money off that. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I still think this is a great idea. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'll keep tabs on that, of course. But we definitely need probably more of a push on PBS CRList. As I said, and as Tim said, it is being worked on, but I think it's definitely moved up the list in terms of priorities. That's for sure. All right, another great Rocetpool thread here and blog post here from Jasper today. So this one's titled "The Rocetpool Layer Zero Bull Case," and Jasper says, running a Rocetpool node is great, but what if you could do more? What if you could validate Ethereum with Rocetpool, secure a data availability layer, and run an Oracle with the same node? Layer 0 equals Crown Rocket, King Rocket. Hopefully I'm getting that. Jasper's going to correct me on that. But you can read this blog post here for full details on what this is. But this concept of restaking your ETH has been getting more and more attention lately, and that's because of something called EigenLayer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm just going to say Eigenlayer. Someone can correct me somewhere. But essentially, Eigenlayer is a data availability layer that wants to use staked ETH as its security mechanism. So you can take staked ETH, whether it be RETH or STETH or some other LSD, and you can restake that with Eigenlayer to secure it. So technically, it's ETH that's securing it. It's just a staked ETH, instead of the ETH itself, right? So this concept, as I said, has been getting more and more popular lately. It's something that Jasper has thought about, obviously, and put in his blog post here. And I think it makes a lot of sense to do this because, I mean, as Sriram here says, who is, I believe, the founder or one of the founders of Eigenlayer, founder of Eigenlayer, he says, Eigenlayer allows a variety of staking modalities, including solo operators in Rocetpool using native restaking. Decentralizing L2 sequences is one of the applications, and application builders can choose relative weights across different staking modalities. So it's just bringing more functionality for stakers, and it obviously gives a lot more functionality to Rocetpool as well, because if you want to restake, well, as a solo staker, you can't as a pure solo staker, you don't get an LSD, right? When you put ETH in as a pure solo staker, you don't get, the protocol doesn't issue you a staked ETH token. So you go through one of these third parties, go through Rocetpool, obviously the most decentralized solution, you get your RETH, and then you're like, okay, what can I do with this RETH? I can put it in an AMM, I can put it in a money market, I can borrow against, I can do all this stuff, but what if I could restake it? And what if I could restake it to secure another network and then get paid for doing that? Well, that's what you potentially will be able to do with Eigenlayer, with other things out there. And I think this concept is going to get more and more popular as time goes on, because not only do you get to, you give the utility to the user to restake this asset, or I guess reuse this asset, but you also get to inherit a bit of that security as well, and you don't have to kind of bootstrap your own. Obviously, it limits you to ETH. Maybe you don't want to issue your own token. Maybe it's like a public good or something like that. But I think this is a really, really cool concept, and obviously you can take it to its logical conclusion and say, okay, well, what if we do like restaked ETH, right? Like you could imagine a world where the RETH gets staked in Eigenlayer, and then Eigenlayer issues you an ERETH, right? Eigen Rocket ETH, for example, and then you can go stake that somewhere else. That is, potentially possible. And people may be wondering, well, doesn't this just sound like the banking system pre-2008 with the GFC and things just getting packaged and repackaged and sold and blah, blah, blah? Yes, but the thing is, with crypto, the beautiful thing about crypto is that we can track the whole thing and we can audit the whole thing on chain. You can see that the ETH was deposited into Rocetpool. The RETH was issued to the user. The user went and staked that RETH with Eigenlayer. They were issued ERETH, and then they took that and staked it somewhere else or put it somewhere else. So there's a trail there that is fully auditable by anyone in the world just by running a full node. I mean, you don't even have to go that far. You could just go on Etherscan. Like, obviously, Etherscan is not 100% trustworthy, but like, you don't even have to go that far, right? Whereas with the traditional system, I mean, it's completely opaque. We don't get to see what's happening in the traditional system. We can't see anything. The regulators get to see it, but like, they don't have full view over it as well. The banks themselves don't even have full view over it. So from that perspective, this sort of stuff is both possible and much safer within crypto than it is in traditional finance, simply because of that audit trail, which I think a lot of people miss. They always do that comparison where they're like, oh, isn't this like the traditional system, rehypothecation, all this sorts of stuff? Like, no, I mean, yes, the mechanisms are the same, but no, the auditing is very different, and that's the key element here. It's not like someone could just issue as much RETH as they wanted to. You can't. The protocol doesn't allow you to do that. You have to put ETH in to get RETH out. That's how it works at the end of the day. So, go give this blog post a read from Jasper here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but I thought it was worth clarifying on that front, because I see a lot of comments around that, definitely pretty commonly. All right, so Aztec has announced support for Euler finance here. So Euler is the first yield protocol supported on Aztec's 4626 bridge, which I spoke about the other day. So what is Euler? How do you earn yield? How do we achieve private lending at 7.5 times lower gas fees than Ethereum mainnet? Well, you can read this thread to learn all about that. But this is cool to see that they're already supporting a DeFi protocol on their 4626 bridge, as I said, I spoke about the other day. And actually, a side note here, it is pronounced Euler. People were bringing me up on this. I did pronounce this one right. This is like the only thing I pronounced right on this show, Euler. It's not Euler. And the funny thing is, I used to actually pronounce it as Euler, and then I went to Google, and it's like, it's Euler. It's named after the mathematician, the famous mathematician, who I can't remember his name except the Euler part. I don't know his first name. Yeah, it is Euler. So I got one thing right. Like, clap for me. But anyway, read this thread. I'll link it in the YouTube description. This is really cool because obviously you get that privacy that Aztec enables, and Euler only exists right now on layer 1 Ethereum, so you get to tap into Euler on layer 1 through the Aztec 4626 bridge. So go check out this thread. As I said, you can read full details on this, but very cool to see this supported. All right, last up here, we have a new blog post from Ingonyama on ZK bridges. So you can read all about the latest killer applications of zero-knowledge proofs in ZK bridges in this 14-minute read from Ingonyama, which I'll link in the YouTube description below for you to read. It is quite technical, but it's fun reading. It's really great. And there's a nice little table here that compares things. So it compares the general features and application-specific comparisons with things like framework, what zero-knowledge proof algorithm they're using, the innovations, all that sorts of stuff, gas costs, all the relevant stuff here. So there's that table, which I'll link the thread in the YouTube description as well for you below. But this is really cool. I love the fact that ZK stuff is just getting more and more integrated within crypto. I mean, it is the future of this industry. If anyone tells you otherwise, they don't know what they're talking about. ZK, or zero knowledge technology, is the future of everything in this industry, from layer 1 to layer 2 to layer 3 to bridges to everything. It is going to transform this industry over the next few years. It already is transforming it, but if you look at the industry as it exists today and look at it in 5 years, it's going to be so totally different. It's going to be crazy how different it is. Just like 5 years ago, the industry was totally different. We didn't really have DeFi. NFTs were kind of a thing, but not really, right? Ethereum wasn't proof of stake, all that sorts of stuff. The industry is going to look very, very different in 5 years. And I think ZK Tech is going to play a absolutely pivotal role in that and going to be at the forefront of that transformation. So on that note, you can go give this a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description. Now, I have a few minutes left here. I want to quickly talk about something. It's funny spending time in the Daily Gwei Discord channel, spending time on Twitter, spending time on Reddit and various different subreddits, not just crypto subreddits, but like other ones. I frequently go to Oz Finance, which is like the Australian finance subreddit, and it's hilarious reading all the comments in there and then reading all the comments in crypto and like seeing how things kind of blur together. And I want to make one comment and a little bit of background here. Before I got into crypto, while I was working like a quote-unquote normal job, and I felt like I couldn't afford a house or couldn't ever buy a house because the prices were so high. For those of you who don't know, Australian real estate is some of the most expensive real estate in the world. All that sorts of stuff. I used to beg and pray for house prices to crash, right? I was like, okay, this is it. The Fed, the RBA, we call it here, the Reserve Bank of Australia, they're going to raise rates. Things are going to crash. It's going to be amazing, right? I'm going to be able to afford a house. Of course, that didn't happen, right? And then obviously prices have come down over the last 6 months, but I mean, they're not back to what they were when I was thinking this 5 years ago, and they're not going to go back there, I don't think. But my main point here is that depending where you are positioned portfolio-wise, especially as a newer person to investing, you definitely have a strong bias to certain things. Now, these days, I don't think like that at all. I don't want the housing market to crash, right? Like that would obviously directly impact me, but I don't need it to crash either because like I don't need a cheaper entry, so to speak. And then take that concept, apply it to crypto. Look at everyone who is a quote-unquote bear right now. They're not bearish, right? What they are is that they are people who want the market to go down so they can get a better entry in order to make more money. That's all it is at the end of the day. So my main point here, and I've gone a little bit off track there, but my main point is that I don't actually think true bears exist within most asset classes, or maybe all asset classes. There's obviously certain assets that you should be bearish on because they're dog shit. I mean, most of the assets in crypto are dog shit, but I'm talking about your ETHs, real estate, good stocks and bonds and things like that, right? Like there are times when you can be bearish for short to medium term, but a lot of the times people are just bearish because they don't have a position on and they want to, and they believe the market's going to turn down more, but they're planning to buy back in eventually. They're not just going to stay out of the market the whole time because they believe that the market's never coming back. I think that's very important to realize is that when you see people being bearish, especially traders, they're obviously operating on very different timelines to you, but they're not bearish in the sense of they think it's all going to zero, everything's done, they're never going to buy back in and make money from it. They just think that the market is due to go down more. They want to get a better entry and then they want to ride it up. They want to ride the cycles like everyone tries to do. So I think that when I look back on how I used to feel about things, depending on, as I was not in position at all back then, I didn't have any stocks, didn't have any crypto, didn't have real estate. I was just a guy working a normal job. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's going to crash. I'm going to be able to get a better entry here. I'm going to be able to afford this sort of stuff. I think that mindset is very dangerous as an investor, especially as a trader. As a trader, it's very, very dangerous. The best traders don't think like that. They know exactly the way it works. But I think as an investor, that definitely is something to consider. So I just wanted to say that because I've been seeing it a lot more lately because obviously rates are going up. I go and visit the Oz Finance subreddit and sure enough, like they're all probably in their 20s and early 30s and maybe even some teens in there as well who are hoping for the prices to crash because they can't see another way to afford to buy, right? But that's the thing. Like they're going to buy. They're planning to buy, right? So that again just adds to the fact that prices never go down as much as you think they are because of the fact that even at some point, the people who wanted to buy are just going to pull the trigger and buy. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that note, but I thought that was just something funny that I've been noticing more and more over the last 6 months because this is the first time in a long time that I've actually experienced a period of time where rates have gone up. Most of my adult life, or pretty much my whole adult life, rates have either gone down or just stayed very, very flat. So now I'm experiencing the opposite of it as an adult, and it's got me thinking about different times in my life and how I thought about different things. And I think for a lot of you guys, you're definitely in your 20s and 30s. I mean, YouTube tells me that from the analytics that I can see, and that's just the majority demographic of crypto anyway. I'm sure you probably feeling the same as me. So just a little bit of context there, not financial advice or anything like that, but just context that I thought was worth sharing. But that's it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.